Reverend Father Dr. K.M.George is a well-known theologian and artist. He was the former principal of Orthodox Theological Seminary. Father George is currently serving as the chairperson of Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorios Chair at the Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. He is also the founding director of Sopana Orthodox Academy. Father George is also a beloved and dear disciple of Mar Gregorios and has published many books in his memory.
Achan, in your book Guru Gregorius, you rightly mentioned that for Guru Gregorius, the frontier character of the incarnate Christ was the springboard for all human dialogue and spiritual communion with the whole world. Can you please explain this statement to us?
Of course, for all Christians, faith in God's incarnation in Jesus Christ is central. And Paulos Mar Gregorios Trimeni, as a Christian, has always insisted on this starting point in his approach to all God's creation. If you look at his later elaborations theologically and philosophically of his understanding of the world, we see the incarnate Christ as the central, motivating, inspiring point.
Achan, what according to you are the factors that led Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorius to study and propagate the in-depth wisdom in the field of philosophy, especially the Indian philosophy?
Well, for all thinking people, philosophy is natural, because in philosophy you look at some of the fundamental questions, like what is reality, what are you, and what is the meaning of life. These are some of the basic questions. And Gregorios Trimeni was a true philosopher in that sense. From his very boyhood, he started raising the question of meaning and the direction of the creation of God. So that normally for him, between theology and philosophy, there is not much difference. In India, because he is in India, he is an Indian, and because of the depth of Indian philosophy, he has gone rather deep into it. So he wanted to combine his Christian approach as well as the Indian approach in the philosophical realm.
Mar Gregorius says suffering is the key to the mystery of existence in the world. He also states that René Descartes took the wrong starting point when he began with the famous statement, I think, therefore I am. Whereas if it had been, I suffer, therefore I am, then it could have made more sense to common people. Why was Mar Gregorius strongly focused on this particular theme, suffering?
I think from his very early days as a teenager, he had to confront a lot of suffering. First of all, the illness of his mother when he was just 13. His mother, to whom he was very attached. And so that was a first alienation for him, this separation from the mother because of her illness. And then again, he was in search for real meaning of his life, when he went to Ethiopia, he suffered a lot. As a teacher, as a Bible instructor, as a Christian, he had to confront a lot of suffering, particularly from Western missionaries who were in Ethiopia at that time, and also from bureaucrats and insensitive people. But he loved Ethiopia deeply. He was always committed to the Ethiopian people and their education. Yes.
Achan, you mention in your book that a major question Mar Gregorius attempts to tackle is whether critical rationality, the essence of modern enlightenment, can be conceptually reconciled and related with the transcendental or mystical experience of religious enlightenment. Can you please help us to understand this statement?
Yes, he did a very profound study of the European Enlightenment. He wrote 2 books, as you know, Enlightenment East and West, and second book, A Light Too Bright. Both books deal with the whole issue of European Enlightenment and the principle of critical rationality. And he always, of course, understood that critical rationality is central to modern scientific methodology. At the same time, he was very fond of the Buddhist tradition. He was a close friend of the Dalai Lama, as you know, and then he also studied very well the great philosophers like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and those people. So he found that in the Buddhist tradition, there is already this principle of critical rationality. But unlike in the West, which was a secularized understanding of science, in India, they could combine both logical, critical rationality with the transcendent dimension of understanding. So he said that for India, what we need is not simple Western secularism, but this our own tradition of a combined approach to reality with the critical rationality as well as the transcendent value.
Freedom is a very pivotal category in Gregorian theology. For him, freedom is the invariable concomitant of true love and the authentic expression of a living community in spirit. Why was Mar Gregorius so attached and connected with the idea of freedom?
Well, theologically speaking, he always understood freedom as one of the most important attributes of God. God is free, and the Spirit of God is the spirit of freedom. That is his Christian understanding. Secondly, in his own personal life, he had to face many oppressive forces. Mental, physical, professional, and spiritual oppressions. So he always struggled against those forces, believing in human dignity and the freedom of the human person, which is a gift of God to humanity. Later on, he had made a study of the colonial movement and how one small section of humanity enslaved the major part of humanity and conquered territories of other people. So he always protested against that colonial conquest and the oppressive powers in the modern world, particularly in the consumerist society, how the rich nations oppress and exploit and enslave the poor nations. So he took freedom as a major theme for his theological, social, ethical, and philosophical reflections. Yeah.
His Grace Dr. Paulus Mar Gregorius had an idea to connect the Delhi Orthodox Center with his thoughts such as Sarva Dharma Nilaya and Niti Shanti Kendra. What were his thoughts behind establishing these two profound ideals?
Yes, that was very symbolic because he was very much peace and justice in our world. He expressed that in his writings and speeches in a very clear way. So when he founded this Orthodox Center, it was not meant to be simply an ecclesiastical headquarters of a bishop's house. No, he wanted this to be a house to disseminate and practice the idea of peace and justice. Secondly, in Delhi, particularly after he came here in 1975 as bishop, he encountered all the Indian religious traditions through important personalities like the Dalai Lama. And then he took it up as a major field of study and reflection and practice. So, Sarva Dharma Nilaya is a house for all religions, not in a very superficial way, but to help people engage in a genuine and profound dialogue between various religious and spiritual streams. This is not a sort of syncretistic attitude, not a very superficial idea, but he thought that by a genuine dialogue and exchange at profound spiritual, theological, and philosophical levels, human beings can come to a new insight about God and the religious tradition. Yeah.
How has the Eastern patristic tradition influenced the thought world of Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorius?
Yeah, that's very clear in a way because he was born in a Christian family tradition which was quite Eastern, Oriental, and Indian. And he was very proud of that always because his early training, his upbringing was always in the Eastern liturgical spiritual tradition of the Orthodox Church. So when he grew up, he encountered Western religious traditions, Roman Catholic, Protestant, Evangelical, and so on. And he had very good relationship with the leaders of those traditions. But his starting point always was this Oriental, in a way, very ancient Oriental apostolic Christian spirituality and theological understanding. Yeah.
Achan, can you brief us about the prayer life of Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorius, which is unknown to many? How important was to him to lead a life of prayer in spite of his commitments to the world?
Yeah, he never thought that one's commitment to the world is antithetical to a prayer life. In fact, he always wanted to combine these things. But in terms of ritual prayers and times of prayer, of course, you can have difficulties when you are traveling, when you are in conferences, etc. But he was always very, very clear that being in communion with God and returning to the source of our spiritual life daily is very important for our affairs in the world. The little introduction he wrote to his book on prayer is very, very instructive, and I find it a very beautiful summary of his understanding and his exhortation to us to lead a life of prayer and spirituality.
Interreligious or church dialogue
Yeah.
can be very fruitful and help break the false traditional bonds. Do you think dialogue that occur today is losing the credentials and principles which Mar Gregorius strongly upheld during his times.
Yeah, the interreligious dialogue is a very common expression now. Um, you can take it in a very ordinary sense of having a meeting, having some presentations on different religions, etc. No, that's not the point. For Mar Gregorius, every religious tradition is significant in its own right, because every religious tradition is seeking the source of the meaning of existence. And in some traditions, like for example in Buddhism, you don't hear about the concept of God, but still the deep spiritual aspiration is very, very significant. So how do you enter these powerful streams of human spiritual aspiration? And in that process, you encounter other traditions. And by bringing out the best in your tradition, you can definitely meet the best in other traditions as well. So the best in our traditions come together, it will give us a completely new picture of the world, of reality, of human life together. That was his understanding.
So, what was the advice he gave you? So many advices and helped you in establishing good world contacts. So, what was the last advice, if you remember, that he gave you before his passing away, even though you were not present in India?
Well, nobody thought that he would pass away that soon. He was only 74. So I don't think there was any last word. But I still remember a very touching moment when he was diagnosed with leukemia. He already had a little bit of cardiac problems. He left the seminary in Kottayam for further examinations, treatments to Mumbai and then to Delhi. In fact, that was his last trip from Kottayam to Delhi. And neither he nor I did realize that was the last thing. But something happened. He was in his room, there was nobody else. He wanted to tell me something. He was emotionally, it was a bit choking experience for him. Yeah, there was a shawl lying on the chair. He asked me to take the shawl and put it on him. So I thought he was feeling too cold. So I took this woolen shawl and just covered him like that. Looking back at that moment, I thought that there was something behind that unconscious gesture. I was putting a little bit of a shroud on his body when he was very silent and emotionally moved. That is not a word, but that was a very powerful moment which I don't speak very much in public.
So, can you share few instances the participation of Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorius, especially in this national capital?
I think that was a very important stage in his life. I lived in Delhi at the Orthodox Center for 3 years as senior secretary for the National Council of Churches. My office was not here, but it was at the CNI Bhavan, but I stayed here at the center. And I learned a lot at that time from him, from his involvement in the national capital. He was invited to many places religious, political, social, philosophical, and in some meetings I accompanied him. He was a member of the India International Center, a very prestigious place of intellectuals, leaders who come. So every day he had discussions with these people, and he used the library at the India International Center very, very well. There was even a saying that if you look for Mar Gregorios, you will find him in the library of the IIC. I think he wrote 3 of his books, primarily using that library, and later on at the Shimla Institute of Advanced Studies. He was much sought after in various meetings. One or two occasions I remember, we just went there as listeners in important meetings, and the moment the chair spots him sitting in the last row of the hall, the chairperson would call out, Bishop Gregorios, would you come forward and say a word? And then he would, of course, go up and would make an intervention, a speech, and the whole audience would be enthralled because they already had many speeches, but when he begins to speak on any subject, on international relations, on the economic policy of the government of India or the of globalization, all these things, the moment he speaks, people are, literally inspired, and then they will ask for people who do not know him would look for him later on. And I remember even when he was very sick and almost bedridden in the Orthodox Center, students and professors from the JNU and Delhi University used to come here to listen to him, and he held sort of informal lectures on various topics. So I think he was fully involved in the intellectual, academic, and social life of the capital here.
So, what are the 3 qualities that you would tell or present to the present generation and the future generations that can help them achieve to aspire for a higher standard of life from the life of Dr. Paulus Mar Gregorius?
I don't know if you can limit these things to just 3, but I can mention some of the things which had impressed me when I was studying under him, working with him, and so on. The first thing is a committed hard work. For learning, for him, it was basically gaining knowledge, learning. Learn from anybody, learn from any quarters. He was open to that the idea of knowledge and the quest for knowledge. And very, very hard work, reading, writing, speaking, reflecting. That was a very hard task he took on himself. Secondly, he was always concerned about the future of the world, future of his church, future of Indian society, future of the global society, and every reflection he produces is always related to the future. That concern for the future is a sign of greatness, I would say, because most people would be happy with their present circumstances, but he always had a longer vision. He looked far ahead of other people. So in matters of ecology, in matters of international politics and the economic structure, all these things, in a way, were serious topics of concern for him. So that commitment to the world, theologically, he would put the word of God. The world God so loved. So you have to love the world and you have to be concerned about the second thing. And thirdly, he was deeply compassionate to the people who have nothing, particularly the mentally deranged persons. Small children, very small children who are also helpless in a way. And he was also devoted to very sattvic people, irrespective of religion. Whether you are Sikh or Hindu or Muslim, it didn't matter to him. When you see an authentically spiritual person, he was always committed to them and he loved them. So this, I would say, arose from his attitude of compassion. Compassion to the world God created and God so loved. So I would say these three things probably can tell us something about his personality. Externally, there are people who were a bit impatient with his temperament. Sometimes he can burst out. Sometimes he can be very angry with people, but never with small children, never with mentally ill people, and never with authentically spiritual people, and never with true learners, people who come to him with genuine questions, intellectual, spiritual questions. He would never refuse them. So again, a mark of his compassion.